Good afternoon, everybody. It is 1:30 on the nose. Thank you for being on time and joining us this afternoon at the 2018 FinCE session titled Constantly Connected, Smartphones, Wearables, and Our New Relationship with Food. Please access the FinCE mobile app to view the session handouts, details, and speaker information. And this is also where you will be submitting questions. You guys have probably been doing this for a couple of days now. If you haven't, there's in the session at the bottom of the page, there's a small little ARS polling icon, and that's where you will be submitting your questions, and you can do that throughout the presentation. Due to DC Fire Code, all attendees are asked to please be seated. And it is my pleasure to be your moderator today. My name is Kim Kircher. I am a registered dietitian and the immediate past chair of the Food and Culinary Professionals, so thanks to anybody who came to our networking session last night. I'm also on the Committee for Lifelong Learning. Has anybody heard of that? It is 10 to 14 members. We have diverse backgrounds, and we basically are responsible for helping to guide the Academy's professional development program. So thank you all for coming to FinCE this year. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Dave Donnan. Dave is a senior partner with A.T. Kearney, a global management consulting firm based in Chicago. During his career, Dave has managed operating companies, run food plants, and consulted to leading global retail and consumer product companies in technology and supply chain strategies, brand growth, and mergers. He works with major hunger relief organizations such as Feeding America, Global Food Bank Network, and Topbox, as well as food startups in the Chicago area as a mentor. Dave is widely recognized as an industry leader who actively speaks and writes on topics of importance to agriculture, food and beverage, retail, and restaurant industries. He has presented at a variety of industry conferences and has appeared on Bloomberg TV and is quoted in business journals including Business Week, The Wall Street Journal, and Forbes. Dave earned his Master's of Business Administration at the University of Toronto Rotman School of Business and his Bachelor of Applied Science in Industrial Engineering from the University of Toronto. He is on the board of Rubicon Organics, Family Farmed, and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. He lives in Chicago with his wife, Karen. Dave, we're so pleased to have you. Thank you for being with us, and thank you, everyone, for coming today.
Thank you, Kim. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here at FinCE, my first FinCE, so it's always interesting to see how it goes. I'm not going to go up on stage. This room layout is interesting. The presentation, let's just get that going. Constantly connected, smartphones, wearables, and our new relationship with food. So first of all, have each one of you felt it? Kind of felt that nudge? You've probably felt that nudge, haven't you? Yeah, I'm sure you have as well, kind of that, just a shift going on. Just a little movement here. You know, for the last decade or so, we've always been enthralled by the celebrity chef. And now we're shifting to be more enthusiastic about the family farmer. And we're looking at the farmer and local. We used to treat eggs as a commodity. We would buy eggs as cheap by the dozen as we can. And now, we buy eggs that are organic, or omega-3, or cage-free. And think about when we were in college or university. We would always look for free food. And having walked the expo floor, I can say dietitians really look for free food. But we've shifted now from free food to food that is free from antibiotics, free from artificial flavors, free from artificial colors. And in fact, if we look at how we've changed, where we've gone, we're no longer buying food based on value, but we're buying food based on values. And so this shift has occurred where each one of us are now looking at food in a totally different way. And that is what really I want to talk to you today about, is how these nudges, how these small incremental changes are changing the way we perceive food, how we choose food, our diets, and how you as dietitians can be part of it as well. So a little bit of history. Our geographic culture has always defined our food culture. Think about it. We've had Japanese food, Mexican food, Indian food, and of course the iconic French food. But as we've seen this shift go on, we now find that rather than our geography culture defining our food is starting to define our culture. And in fact, we're now defining ourselves and identifying ourselves around the diets we have. Whether you're a vegan or a vegetarian or keto or paleo, or you're pescatarian or my favorite flexitarian. We're now identifying, and in fact, when you go to a restaurant these days, the two questions the waiter or waitress usually asks you are, do you have any food allergies? And do you have any food restrictions? And the food restrictions are often around vegan, vegetarian, paleo, all the different types of things. And so we find these food tribes where we're identifying, and we go onto Facebook and we go onto the internet and we identify with other people like them and we share ideas and share recipes, etc. And so the idea behind food now defining a culture is sort of different than it's always been historically. And that is having significant implications. So today our diets and our eating patterns are really being influenced by 5 major areas. First is the rising healthcare costs. We're going to talk about how healthcare, and as people realize, and consumers in general are now finally realizing that what they eat has an impact on their health, and particularly around non-communicable diseases like hypertension and diabetes and obesity. People are realizing that there is that cause and effect relationship. The second part is on community and peer influences. Our community is often a geographic community, but our community is also our online community, and how influencers from social media affect how we choose food. A focus on well-being. We've gone from wellness to well-being, and the definition of the wellness society and what we think of in well-being is now pervasive in our employment, in our lifestyle, in what we eat, in what we do in our activities. There's new generational influences. Millennials, obviously, as most of the media has spent the time talking about, but the even bigger generational cohort is Generation Z, the ones following millennials, that were born from 1998 to 2016. And then the ones behind them, the children of millennials that are born in 2016 onwards, the alpha generation, are going to even have it more profound. But remember, Generation Z is the first generation to grow up totally digitally connected, having smartphones since they were children. And so the shift in perceptions and influence are significant and profound with them as well. And then finally, mobile technology and artificial intelligence are all going to have an impact as well. And so I'm going to talk about each one of these in a bit of different levels to really show how connected together this change in the way we perceive food and the way we think about diets and the way we think about consumption from a consumer point of view is changing. So first thing is healthcare costs. This chart is a bit hard to read, but the blue lines represent GDP growth, gross domestic product growth, which is a measure of economic growth in countries, and all across the bottom are the major countries in the world. The red dots represent change in healthcare costs growth. You can see in every country around the world, healthcare costs are outstripping the growth of the economy. In fact, in China right now, the economy is growing at 7 or 8%. Healthcare costs are going at 12%. In Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand, where I was just this last summer giving speeches in agricultural forums, the economy is growing at 4 to 5%, and healthcare is growing between 10 and 13%. This is unsustainable. And so our healthcare costs, we have to do something different. And so as you know from policy discussions and government discussions and discussions around healthcare and the use of healthcare by governments, we're seeing more and more ways that governments are trying to influence our healthcare, whether it's sugar taxes or whether it's on how insurance companies pay for different types of processes. But we have to figure out how to get that in touch. And this is having an effect on our food as well. So we're seeing this shift as well in the entire healthcare industry to become more like a consumer products industry. So our healthcare industry for decades has always been based on, closed networks. You went to your one doctor, your family doctor. It was supply driven. You were basically looking for, the doctor was the only source of medical advice you would get. It was analog. Everything was written on paper, inscribed on notes, and it was passive. You as the consumer basically listened to your doctor and did what they said. We're now seeing this shift towards more of a consumer-oriented healthcare system, where it's more open network. You may see multiple doctors and UFC specialists, whether you're seeing somebody for muscle problems or someone for diet problems or someone for heart problems. You're also as demand-driven in that consumers are demanding more health information, are demanding more health advocacy and more health access to information. It's digital. We're seeing the entire use of digital media, whether it's on your smartphone or digital records and health records. And then active. Consumers are now taking charge in many cases of their own healthcare because they have the information resources. And so this move from a patient-doctor-centric healthcare model to a consumer-oriented healthcare model is shifting the entire way that we see healthcare. And you can see it, I'm sure each of you, outcome-based payments rather than activity-based payments. We're seeing for millennials are healthier than other generational cohorts. They smoke less, they drink less, they're more active. But they're also poorer, massive student debt, and not getting the same salaries because of the 2008 recession. And so these things, you're seeing again those nudges occurring that are changing the nature of the healthcare system and how consumers perceive it. Consumers are also shifting around a new influencer model. How many of you have either gone online or seen Laura Vitale with her Italian cooking? So Laura's not a chef. She's not a dietitian. She has no real experience in it, but she has 3.8 million visitors a month and 1.1 million Instagram followers of her Laura's Cooking, Italian cooking. She's taken her grandmother's cooking recipes, she's put them into a very entertaining videos, put them online, and she's influencing a lot of people around Italian cooking. There are many others like Laura out there. Good ones and bad ones as well, as we know with Goop and the famous Vani Hari, the food babe. So these influence models are where consumers are going in many cases to get information because they're easy, they're accessible, they're entertaining. And so the influencer model, and particularly social media influencer, is having that profound effect on how we view food because it's constantly available to us. And at the same time, think about any patients you have. And it used to be where doctors would worry because a patient would come into their office with a stack of Google searches on their particular ailment. Now they're not only coming in with that, they're coming in with YouTube videos and some doctor in some far off land has some study. They're coming in with more information than in many cases the doctors can deal with. And so it's hard to keep up with all those influencers on the marketplace. So who influences our diet? As a consumer, who influences our diet? Hopefully, it's a dietitian. That's what we all hope for, right? The dietitians, you know most about diets and how it goes on. But in many cases, it's not a consumer's not going to a dietitian to get advice on diets. They pretty much go to their mom, their family, or their Facebook friends. That's where they're going to get their initial ideas on what they should do and how they should eat. Sometimes they go to a doctor if it's serious enough, but as my son, who's a doctor who went through 4 years of medical school and an internship and then fellowship and got 1 week of nutrition training. Doctors are not necessarily the experts on nutrition, and particularly when I have a consumer coming in with all this information that says, I should be eating these things and this way and high fat, high carb, low carb. They're coming in and being overwhelmed with that information. So where else do they go? In many cases, their yoga instructor, or their fitness instructor, or their health instructor. Again, part of that well-being mindset that we're going after. And as I mentioned before, in many cases, social media is where they're getting that information as well. So the question becomes, as a professional, how do you get above the noise? How does your message come through? How do you become that icon, that person to go to, that trusted advisor to the consumer who has all these choices that they're going after today? So, sorry about that. So the influencer model is fairly significant. 70% of millennials are influenced by peers. So Facebook friends, family is who influences, not just on food, but on all consumer products. And 60% of consumers are influenced by social media posts when shopping. So many of you, I'm sure, as you're shopping, whether online or physically in stores, you're checking out that product through their website or through an alternate shopping site, etc. And so social media posts become important. And the one that I've seen most relevant is that 50% of consumers now post pictures of their food. You know, it used to be, again, when I was young and you went to a great restaurant, you would ask the chef for a copy of the menu. Now you've got pictures of every entree and dessert and appetizer and drink. I went, every time I go out to dinner with my millennial son and daughter-in-law, I always get back the entire menu in picture format. But that's how we're interacting with food. In fact, chefs at restaurants now have to develop Instagrammable food items. And so they're creating plates, they're creating menu items that look great on the plate. Now, are they nutritious or tasty? I don't know, but they look great on a plate and they're great to post. And so this Instagrammable menu item becomes very much a thing that the restaurant industry is struggling with as well. But products that promote wellness are demonstratingly significant, stronger growth. So look at the red. Overall, food categories have a meager 1% growth rate, and this is over a year period measured by SPINS, which is a research firm that looks at consumer purchases. But look at natural and organic at 8%. Performance nutrition, 33% growth. 13% growth in refrigerated plant-based meats. 11% in refrigerated ready-to-drink teas and coffees, 11% in protein supplements and meal replacements, and shelf-stable wellness bars at 10%. They're double-digit growth in many of these areas. And this is having an impact on the large food companies as well. In fact, over the last 3 years, the top 25 food companies, the ones that you know, the brands that you know, the top 25 food companies lost over $18 billion in market share. And they've lost it to, as people no longer shop the center of the grocery store, they shop the perimeter, where the fresh fruits and vegetables, the seafood, the meats, the dairy, the bakery are. And they buy more private label products, and they're buying more startup products. Think about your local foods and the startups. Think about Chobani and how it has upsided the yogurt industry. It didn't exist 7 or 8 years ago. So these are the things that are facing the industry right now, because these are the growth categories around health and wellness and nutrition. And it's not just a U.S. phenomenon. In fact, Nielsen has just done a study globally looking at consumers and nutrition awareness. And so if you look at cutting down fats, you can see, 65% of global average of consumers are trying to cut down in fats. 68% in Asia Pacific and 68% in Latin America. Greater than North America, where we think, everybody is obsessed with it. It's actually, if you go to Latin America, and I was just in Brazil last month, a very focus on a healthy culture and healthy eating. Similarly, if you look at cutting down on sugar and sweets, very high incidence in Latin America, 64%, 66% in Europe. And then finally, eating more natural, fresh foods. Again, Latin America, very high, and Middle East and Asia Pacific as well, above 50%. So this is a global phenomena. And in fact, I will even tell you this is a cross-income level phenomena. I do a lot of work with Feeding America and with major food banks. And consumers, even without means and can't afford things, although convenient foods and low-cost foods are still being eaten, when they go to a food bank, they always are looking for fresh fruits and vegetables. They're looking for more healthy things, not for themselves, but for their children. And in fact, the work I've done with Top Box, which is a Chicago-based nonprofit that provides healthy proteins and healthy fruits and vegetables to the south side and west side of Chicago for the impoverished areas, they target grandmothers for their product. Because the grandmothers, A, still know how to cook, and B, are cooking the meals for the grandchildren. And that's the way they're trying to get fresh food and better-for-you food out there as well. So the wellness economy, as we know it, is huge. $3.7 trillion in the wellness economy in 2015. And you can see beauty and anti-aging at, $1 trillion by itself. Wellness tourism at $563 billion. Fitness at $542 billion. Preventative medicine. And then healthy eating nutrition at $648 billion. This is not just about food. This is about lifestyle. And in fact, well-being is not just about physical, but it's also about mental and lifestyle in general. And this is an economy that is growing dramatically And many of the large consumer product companies are saying, how do I position myself into this whole lifestyle, well-being, wellness environment as well? And particularly as I look at it from a food perspective. So big companies are getting involved. Apple with their iWatch 4 now has various things that are measuring body measurements, etc. We have Google, which is actually putting in place the underpinnings and foundation of a digital healthcare record systems, so that they can have the foundational products for digital healthcare that's pervasive across the nation. And then Amazon, they bought Whole Foods, which was an interesting one as well. And then the most recent, where they've done the joint venture with Berkshire Hathaway, and looking at the whole healthcare system and being a healthcare provider around prescriptions and being able to deliver drugs to consumers. So we're seeing the large tech companies investing a lot of money into this whole healthcare wellness economy. In fact, I was just saying to Kim, just announced a day or two ago, Walmart's CEO said, we don't want to become another Sears. And so they're investing heavily into healthcare wellness types of activities, including putting medical clinics in their stores to healthier products as well. So this is something that's now pervasive across the industry, not just in the food industry. And so technology is part of our lives. I warn you now, this statistic will scare you. We are spending 6 hours a day on a screen. 6 hours a day on digital media in the US. It has become an epidemic. And people now, if you walk along the street, you see people walking with their phones, talking in the elevator, everybody's looking at their phones. So we're constantly interacting with our mobile devices and some digital media. In fact, if you look at both Apple and Android are now putting in applications that limit the amount of phone time you'll have and actually give you feedback that, hey, you've spent too long on social media or whatever. But this is huge in the US, six hours a day. In China, it's growing just as fast. It's at 3 hours a day. And in fact, as I mentioned, I was in Thailand and Malaysia, and every other store in the mall now is a mobile store. They've basically leapfrogged over top of landline-based telephones right into mobile technology. And so we've got mobile technology now available pervasively around the world. In fact, one of the most interesting statistics I heard was there are 500 million smartphones now in the world, and every one of them has a weather app on it, right? You check the weather for the next day. We're getting barometric pressure data from 500 million users on an hourly basis. Scientists are now using that data and doing deep data analysis and machine learning to try to find out what are the climate changes that are being affected from this huge database of sensors, which never existed before. And now they can look at nuances in microclimates by region, by city, by wherever, by time of day, by day in the week. And so this data that's coming from all of our use of smartphones is being harvested and used in very different and unique ways. And so we're seeing more and more sensors in our lives as well. So you've got, Google Maps. Now we have to travel with our map system because we no longer know how to read a paper map or get directions ourselves. Our thermostats, having a Nest thermometer. I have a Nest thermometer at home, and I know when I'm away for a couple of days, I turn the temperature down, and before I get back, I turn it back up again. And then we've got our fitness trackers, and we've got precision cooking with sous vide machines and our smart cookers. And so we've got this pervasive use of sensors, and guess what? All the sensors are being mined. All the sensors are being harvested. All that data is coming in here. The great phrase I love is, if you're getting Facebook for free, you're not the customer, you're the product. Because what Facebook is doing is mining all that data on what you like, what you don't like, what you look at, what you don't look at, and selling that to consumer product companies and advertisers and marketers. So that is the pervasiveness that we're seeing of sensors. And in fact, we're looking at the wearable markets, and wearables being Fitbits and our smartwatches and other devices growing at 156% compounded annual growth rate. So we're seeing this tremendous growth in these types of technologies, and they've just started. I mean, wearables have only been around for, 3-4 years? And look at how much they're growing. What's it going to be like in 5 years' time? What's it going to be like in 10 years' time? That's where I think some of the changes are going to occur. So, are all of you familiar with the book Nudges? So Nudges is a book based on cognitive psychology that talks about how small changes can change behavior. And so a nudge may be that if you're going and starting a new job and you're supposed to sign up for a 401k, and it used to be you had to sign up for a 401k, and if you didn't sign up, you wouldn't get it. Now companies have realized the nudge is you don't sign up. If you don't go on and opt out, they automatically put it in. So it's automatically putting money away so that you can save money as well. And there's the UK government and several other large organizations have looked at how these small behavioral cognitive changes, whether it's incentives, premiumization, reduction of bad things, etc., how they change behavior. So technology provides us instant feedback. If I know how many steps I've taken, here I'll give you another example. How many of you have Fitbits or smartwatches or some other device? How many of you have been walking home, walked up to your front door, looked at your watch or Fitbit and said, oh, I've got 9,500 steps, and just keep on walking? That's a nudge. Get you to walk 10,000 steps. So technology is providing that instant feedback. Our food choices are influenced by perceived outcomes. Remember, health costs are going up. We're going after a well-being and nutritious type environment. We're more conscious of what we're eating. Well, that feedback and my food, maybe I can start to correlate the two together. And that will result, it will change how we choose our food. So I think the dramatic thing that we're all going to see in the next 5 to 10 years is shifts in our diet based on automatic feedback we're going to get from a variety of devices. And I'm going to talk about those devices in a few minutes. But this is a small nudge that I think can have a profound effect. And so how will that manifest itself over the next little while? We now track our activity and our health. So 12% of people check body weight, 26% track exercise, diet, mood, sleep quality, a lot of things. A lot of people are using the sleep monitors on an iPhone or Android to actually check sleep quality and whether they go into REM sleep or not. And so all of this data is being harvested, all this data is being sold. But it helps people understand their sleep patterns. And similarly, if you look at the millennials and Generation Z, we're seeing percentage of respondents that regularly track exercise with some type of technology. 33% of Gen Z, 36% of millennials, 28% of Gen X. I'm a boomer, 16%, and then the silent generation. And why are Gen Z lower than millennials? Because some of them are too young to have a smartwatch yet. So that will actually, the prediction is there will even be higher. And so we're using these technologies now ubiquitously, constantly, all the time, as part of our life. So what are some of the next frontiers? Well, iWatch 4, who just came out, does heart monitoring. And it gives with 97% accuracy if you have any heart arrhythmias. It will tell you. Because it's tracking your heart rate consistently, constantly. And if it sees any aberrations, and again, it's using machine learning and artificial intelligence, it then can tell you have some sort of arrhythmia, you need to see a doctor, etc. So this is a fairly, just has come out, but this is going to have profound effects, particularly with people that have any effect on heart conditions, etc. The next one that's coming out is a portable glucometer. Right now we've got the glucose patches that go on the side. It's going to be, and they're working on it now, that either on your wrist or just a small device will give you blood sugar on a constant basis. So I eat my meal, 2 hours later, what's my blood sugar? Well, I'm not going to eat that again. And so think about that constant feedback. If I'm, measuring my blood sugar 2 hours after a meal and adjusting my diet based on that to keep my blood sugar below a certain threshold. And then the next ones are coming up, which are going to be polymer sensors. And this one's an over-exaggerated one on the front tooth. Nobody would put it on a front tooth. You'd put it on your back tooth. But it will measure things like alcohol or sugar or saline or any other type of nutrient as you're eating it. And that's an available technology that's now, again, being reduced in size, reduced in cost, made commercial. But given the speed of technology innovation, it's going to happen. And so these are the types of things we're seeing as the next level of frontiers on wearables. In fact, if you want to really see some fascinating stuff, go to the future market on Alpha Food Labs. What they do, Alpha Food Labs out in New York City, is they take current trends in science, current breakthroughs in science and technology, and apply it to a what-if situation on a food product. So here's three that I just brought to example. CRISPR potato chips. Think about it, gene editing on potatoes or potato chips to enhance the flavor. So I get a much more robust flavor, a bigger flavor, a better mouthfeel, all of these things that I could do with a genetically modified or genetically edited, it's not a GMO, it's a genetic edit of a potato chip. The second one, Analyze Me, is actually a pill, it's a sensor you swallow that sits in your gut and measures gut bacteria and tells you whether your gut bacteria is on or off. So think about probiotics and prebiotics. What if I actually could measure it and I knew exactly what to take to bring back the homeostasis or the balance that I need? And then the final one, custom culture. Again, with DNA and my DNA matching and measurement, can I have specific types of food, drinks that I would use that would be specifically designed to me? And these are all possible. They're not commercially viable right now, but they're all possible. So these are the food items that I mean, it's just fascinating to see what people are dreaming up as sort of what can be used with the technology available. So what can we expect in the next 10 years? First, sensors and wearables will influence our eating. We've said that. We're going to get immediate biofeedback. We're going to know the cause and effect of what we eat and how it affects certainly bodily measurements. It's going to have an effect on our eating. More personalization and targeted meals. As a result, I can get more, if I have specific dietary restrictions or I have certain things that I can eat, I will find sources to get that product. And we're seeing with changes in food technology, the ability to actually make more smaller scale, smaller lot sizes of products so I can do it economically. Transparency is expected. So if I'm going to have these things, I expect to know what's in my product. So it used to be I would buy my food based on what it was. Now I buy my food based on not only what it was, but where it came from and how it was made. And so that transparency, and you're going to see, I'm going to give some examples of where transparency gone wrong, where consumer product companies have projected one image, but as consumers look at the labels and everything else, find another image entirely. Indulgence with a mission. How do you define good? Indulgences are important. They're part of our well-being. They're part of our mental well-being. And so how do we incorporate things that are supposedly not good for you into our diet as well, and how consumers are dealing with that? And then finally, shop for value and values. I want still a good price, but I'm going to want a good price of a product that has values, that I know that it represents something, whether it's cage-free eggs or whether it is, looking at certain types of ingredients being used. So, the next generation, and whether it's the growing Generation Z or the Alpha generation, which are coming online now, they're growing up with sensors and wearables. Where I said Generation Z is the first digital generation, always on a smartphone, the Alpha generation will be the first wearable generation. $300 million in funding is being spent on baby and children monitoring startups. Okay, so monitoring, and in fact, as a baby boomer, we were always criticized for being helicopter parents. Millennials are drone parents. Because they have monitors everywhere. So my son and daughter-in-law just had a baby, 4 months old, my first grandchild, yay. Sitting in the apartment with them, the baby's in the other room, said, how's the baby doing? They pick up their phone and look at he's doing fine. They have cameras everywhere. 30% are concerned with their friends judging what their kids eat. There's a big one as well. So you pack the food that you want your friends to think are good. And 64% of patients use a mobile device to monitor health. And this is just going to increase. And so the new era of personalization of meals, whether it's Hero or many others that are, beyond just having a diabetic meal, now I can have a meal that's specifically designed for what are the things that I need. If I have micronutrients that I need to have in my system, if I have certain types of dietary restrictions, or my food tribe is of a certain type. The companies are now developing meal kits and other things that are specifically designed for micro segments, personal attributes that people are looking for. But as I said, the downside, the negative of this is what I'll call health washing. Whether on the one side we have gluten-free water, you've all seen that, haven't you? And the other one is Naked Juice, and Naked Juice is a great product, but they got caught in a trap. Look at the front of the label of Naked Juice. It's got kale, and it's got cucumbers, and it's got lettuce, all these healthy things. But look at the ingredients. It's mostly made out of apple juice and orange juice, and has 34 grams of sugar. And they got caught out on this, and consumers brought that to their attention, saying, you're purporting to be healthy, but you're not as healthy as you say you are. And so consumer product companies, food companies, are now having to really look beyond just putting a product, getting a brand behind it, hoping people will buy it, but they know people are going to go that next layer. They're going to dig deeper. How it was made, where did it come from? So one of the things I talked about this is indulgences. And one of the things that's happened is the premiumization of snack foods. And the premiumization of snack foods really comes down to the better chocolates, better, cookies, Skinny Pop, etc. We're finding that people still want indulgences. They still want to have those snack foods. But if they're going to eat something, they want it to be a better quality product. They don't want to eat just garbage. They want to have something that has better taste, better flavor, it doesn't have to be better for you, because they know it's bad for you, but it has to be better tasting and much better quality. So the comment is, only eat bad things that are good. And that we're seeing across the board on snack foods right now, is this premiumization of snack foods, and how we're moving up in price and in quality of many of these snack foods. So cheap snack foods are not the de rigueur anymore. So how do you capture the health and wellness opportunity? For you, what's the next step? First, we have to identify who is that new food consumer. So I put together a bunch of pieces. So let's wrap it into what a food consumer looks like. Now, this is a generalization, but I think you can identify with many of them. First of all, they're concerned about well-being and health. Now, they're not going to just buy healthy food. They're going to still buy indulgences, but they're going to be concerned about how food impacts their well-being, mental, physical, active, as well as their health in general. They're exploring by grazing and snacking. People generally don't eat 3 meals a day anymore. There are 7 snacking occasions. Can you name them? We have 2 breakfasts, just like the hobbits. Before our workout, we'll have a small something to eat, and after our workout, we'll have some hydration or a protein bar. We have then our 10 o'clock Starbucks run. Then we have lunch. Then we have our 2 o'clock Starbucks run. And then we have dinner. And then if we go out anywhere at night, we'll have some sort of either carb loading or some sort of a snack after going to the movie or going to the bar or going somewhere else. And so 7 different times that we snack. And in fact, if you look at how people eat, it's much more snacking than full meals. But look at the household demographics as well. 62% of our households now are singles and couples. The mom and dad and 2 kids is now a minority. 62% are singles and couples. And that has increased because millennials have delayed marriage, delayed children, again, because of student debt and loans and things like that. And so that has forced people to eat in smaller portions, more often, single serve, etc. We want healthy, but also indulgent. I want to eat healthy, but not all the time. I want to reward myself. I want that, mini reward, by eating a chocolate bar or having an ice cream or whatever. But I've got to balance it. So we've got to look at both sides of the psyche. They trust their friends more than ads. Nobody watches TV ads or looks at magazine ads or whatever, but they will trust their Facebook friends, their family, for advice on what to do. Think about restaurant recommendations. Many of you will go on to OpenTable or to Yelp or whatever to look for restaurant recommendations, but at the same time, you're not really sure because sometimes they're padded either positively or negatively, so you'll ask your friends of what restaurants have you gone to, what do you recommend? Mistrust of government and corporations. Every year, Edelman does a trust barometer, and the trust we've had in institutional figures, whether it's politicians and government or big business, has gone down dramatically. People don't trust large corporations, don't trust large government. Again, they trust their family and friends for advice. And so that expert, what was the trusted source before, has got to regain some ground. Whoops. And they actively seek information with the aid of technology. Whether it's going to come from a smartwatch, a smartphone, a Google search, going on YouTube, going to some of these bloggers and influencers, actively look for information, particularly when they're going to make a choice regarding some food item that they think is going to impact their health. And so where do they go and how do they get it is an important part of it. So for food manufacturers, those big top 25 food companies that lost $18 billion in market share, what does it mean for them? It's a fundamental shift for them. First of all, they've gone from food as a commodity. Didn't matter where I got my wheat and flour from, didn't matter where I got my corn from, didn't matter where I got these things from, to now food as a source of better life. So food is life, and people are realizing that the quality and the consistency, where it came from, how it was made, are just as important. From unknown origins, I don't know where the product came from, it just arrives in a package at the grocery store, to food with a source and a story. That's why farmers are now kind of cool, because they have a story to tell. They can talk about how they grow their product and how they, either grew it organically, or if they didn't grow it organically, how they grew it with care, and how they raised their cattle or chickens or whatever. And so this story behind the product is becoming very fundamental. If you look at McDonald's in Canada, all of their advertising now links back to, where did that meat patty come from? Where did the dairy come from? Where did the French fry come from? They go back to a potato farmer somewhere in Prince Edward Island and talk about the potatoes they're growing. Stories are important. So products with purpose and stories. And finally, for food manufacturers, mega factories, huge factories sitting in the middle of Iowa that were processing corn and soya, to now producing closer to the consumer. So we're seeing local foods growing dramatically. We're also seeing a technology change occur. How many of you are familiar with indoor grow, urban farming, vertical farming? So the ability to grow in greenhouses and more importantly, grow in enclosed environments using LED lighting is not economically there yet, but within 2 to 3 years it will be. And we're seeing great advances in the idea of indoor growing. So we're growing, lettuce and sprouts and cucumbers and tomatoes. The big breakthrough that people are working on right now around the world is strawberries. Can we grow strawberries indoor and get better flavored strawberries than those big ones that are about this big you get in any at the hotels where they slice them up for you, that have no taste, but look like a strawberry. So what are the implications? First, segmentation of consumer demand. We're seeing the shift from a demographic-based segmentation of people by age and income to much more psychographics on what their behavior is, what they're looking for, how they perceive their food. Health regulatory pressures, as I mentioned, it's unsustainable, our healthcare costs. So you're going to see government or insurance companies or whatever influencing how people eat. Food as medicine is going to become an important word in the next 5 to 10 years. Do-it-yourself health and wellness. As consumers have access to these electronic media, social media, access to doing reports and searches, they are taking more active participation in their role. And as we move from a doctor-centric model of healthcare to a consumer-centric model of healthcare, that's even going to become quicker and faster. And then finally, new alliances are formed, whether it's Amazon and Whole Foods and what they're doing with Berkshire Hathaway, or in China, Alibaba, which is the Amazon of China, buying up 56 drug chains and is basically now into the drug distribution business. Healthcare is the big market for these high-tech firms because they see, again, it's totally fragmented, it's totally discombobulated, bad information. If they can create some synergies here, it's worth a lot of money. So we're seeing this massive shift across not only food, but consumer products in general. Moving from a transaction or a transaction-based relationship between consumers and products to a trust-based relationship. Moving from I define my purpose as what I own a Mercedes, I own a big car, I own a big house. I define myself in what I do. I go skiing, I'm healthy, I'm a jogger, I do different activities. That's why vacation pics posted on Instagram are so high. People are not posting pictures of their car, they're posting pictures of their experiences. And then finally, the segmentation of the marketplace is becoming much more personalized, so we can get down to the individual with the data coming from the various sensors that we have. So some key questions to consider. How well do you understand the health attributes of your ingredients? So if you're a food manufacturer, do you really understand the health attributes of your ingredients, all of your ingredients? Are you prepared for the ingredient information and process transparency? So are you prepared for consumers to ask those tough questions of not only what is it, where did it come from, how it was made, and show me all the steps in between? How well do you understand the consumer as a data feed? We're collecting all this information from us. How do we start to use it properly to actually provide better products? And I think probably my last slide, the most important one, is how do industry experts remain relevant when? And the industry experts could be a food technologist. It could be a brand marketer. It could be a dietitian. How do industry experts remain relevant when do-it-yourself health becomes normalized? It's expected that people are going to be researching the different ways of solving their health problems, of what's causing it, all of the different things that are available to them. How do you remain relevant when feedback technology is ubiquitous, where people are getting? So think about that doctor who got the patient coming in with a stack of Google searches about their ailment. Now they're going to come in with that stack of searches, but they're also going to say, and here's my biofeedback for the last month whenever I did this, and this is the correlation between me eating these foods and my heart rate going this way or whatever. I mean, it's overwhelming, the amount of information that'll be available. And then finally, the influencer models dominate communications. If we don't trust big government and big business and we're not reading ads anymore, where are we going for our information? And that influencer model. The influencer model could be the food babe, or the influencer model could be the mom, or the influencer model could be a dietitian. And I think that's where the opportunity is. We're at the cusp of a major rethinking of nutrition and food that's going to be enforced and enhanced by technology. And you all are at that pinnacle point that you can take advantage of it and really benefit from it as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dave. We're going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A. Thank you for the questions that have been submitted. If you're having any trouble with the ARS polling, I found it helpful to close out of the app and come back in, just do a refresh. So we're going to start with the most loaded questions. Are you ready? This one received 255 points. Please address any research on how certain wearables and tech actually change behavior and outcomes, will, disease risk, et cetera, or not.
So the research is somewhat limited because most wearables, et cetera, have only been around for a certain number of years, but a lot of it is being around activity monitoring. And so are people walking more? Are they exercising more? And so the original data is showing that in some cases, yes, it's having an impact on consumers. In some cases, consumers don't care. They get a Fitbit for Christmas and then wear it for a month and then throw it or don't use it anymore. So I think the research is coming forward, but this whole idea of the cognitive psychology-based nudges, of little influences, are what's going to affect people the most. And I think, again, the technology industry, and particularly if you saw the growth of wearables, people are putting money against that research to really show the cause and effect and the outcomes based on being able to get that feedback mechanism.
Thank you, Dave. Next question, any examples, oops, it's jumping around a little bit, thanks, keep them coming, but I'm going to jump with them. Any examples of how larger food companies are successful at marketing to millennials? So part of it is just getting out. I mean, the great example, it's not what I would call a healthy food, but it's a good tasting food, is Oreos. Oreos has been really good at social media, and Oreos has been really good at bringing out really wild flavors and colors and shapes and everything else. And they've got a following because of that, because they were constantly refreshing their brand.
And so I think that's one where it may not be a healthy product, but it's an indulgent product that they've been able to take advantage of the social media influencer model to a large extent. I think the other ones that are out there as well are some of the yogurt brands. You look at General Mills has been pretty effective in some of the things that they've been doing with their new organic brands and Annie's and things like that. A classic example of one that went wrong would be Kellogg's and Kashi. Kellogg's kind of took Kashi and then tried to, optimize it and make it more efficient and more profitable, and lost the panache, lost the localization, lost the authenticity that the product had. They're rebuilding it now, but the idea of authenticity and transparency are fundamental to that as well.
Thank you. With consumers trusting friends over ads, can you speak to the impact of mandates on disclosure for influencers? Are influencers having less of an impact on marketing because disclosure communicates a paid ad?
That's an interesting question. I mean, my question to you is how many actually read that little thing that says, sponsored by up top? I think a lot of people glance through it as you're going down your Facebook feeds. Do you understand the one that's posted by your friend or the one that's posted by, it looks like your friend but it's sponsored? I think that's a question that's going to come up more and more as people become more cautious of fake news and all the other things that have been going on and try to read through it. But I think in general, people are scrolling through, they've got 30 seconds of attention time, and they'll read what they read. And so the disclosures, while important, I don't know are as strong as they should be.
Do you have suggestions for leading transition to a more technology-based workplace where the workers are not so receptive to change? This is personally seen due to age and also socioeconomic status.
Wow. So I'll make it fun. So I'll give an example. A school district in Chicago, they were renegotiating with Blue Cross Blue Shield on health insurance for their teachers, and the costs were going up. And they noticed a lot of teachers were hypertension and all the standard types of things that teachers have. So one of the things they did was they got every teacher a Fitbit. And rather than just give them a Fitbit, they also gave them an incentive that said, okay, we're going to have a contest every week, who walks the most steps. And whoever wants those steps, we give them a lunch voucher or some small incentive. What they found was the teachers were out walking at recess, they were out walking at lunchtime, they were all competing against each other. And over the course of 6-9 months, they actually saw some of the incidences of the hypertension-related aspects go down. And actually, they saw that their health outcomes improved over about a 9-month period, just because of more exercise for teachers. And so, I think the Luddite thing is you got to make it fun. I mean, technology is scary for those that don't use it. Make it so that it's fun to use and it becomes not so much of a threat as a tool to use or an advancement.
Accurate measurement of diet and nutrition remains the holy grail of nutritional assessment. Are you aware of any new or emerging technologies to address this accurately?
No, I think that, as you know, and you know better than I do, what people report they eat and what they actually eat are on two different planets. And so how do we get to the point where we can actually track what people eat without putting them into a metabolic chamber or something like that? I'm not sure, but how many of you have been to Chicago with Amazon Go, the Amazon Go store? Fabulous store. So the Amazon Go store is a small convenience store, about the size of where these chairs are here. It sells grab-and-go food, salads and sandwiches, beverages from kombucha to Diet Coke, snack bars, chocolates, meal kits. So it's very small, kind of like a convenience food store. What you do is you take out your phone, you've got your Amazon Prime app, you scan it as you walk in the door, put it away, and then pick out what you want and walk out. No cashier. You don't have to show it. You don't have to scan anything. You just walk through, pick the things you want, walk out the door. So how does it do it? As you're scanning your phone, and you've already signed off the disclosures and opting in and everything. As you're scanning in your phone, it's doing facial recognition of your face. So there's cameras everywhere. So what they do, and I used to run a security company, so I know how the facial recognition works. What they call paints your face. So it digitizes your face. And then it tracks where you go in the store. And when you reach for a product, there's a camera that shows that product has been removed from the shelf. If you put that product back on the shelf, it will know that you did not buy it. But as you take the product off, and you can stick it in your coat, or you can stick it in your pocket, or stick it in a bag, doesn't matter. As you take the product off the shelf, it records it. And as you walk out the door, it knows that you, because of facial scanning, are the one walking out the door. And so it's attributed you coming in the store, you and each one of your purchases, and you walking out the store. All part of an artificial intelligence app. They're putting them all through. It's going to change the nature of convenience stores. No longer going to a convenience store and having to stand there while the teenager behind the glass partition is kind of looking at his phone and kind of wakes up to the fact that you're there and doesn't have change and all the rest of it. So,
with all this technology and wearables, why are we not seeing a downshift in obesity? And do you think we will ever with all this technology?
I think obesity is much more complicated than just wearables. I mean, wearables is primarily activity-based, and the ones I showed you about, glucometer and that, they're not there yet. Maybe when they do come. Again, they may be expensive, and it may not be usable by a lot of the people that need it. But I think it's a much more, as as obesity is a much bigger problem. I deal with, as I said, I've been working the last 7 years with Feeding America, and then with the Global Food Banking Network, which is Feeding America for the globe. They work in India and Brazil and China. And obesity is just another form of malnutrition, and so for them, it's all about how do we just get the right nutrients to people. And so I don't think wearables will solve that in the near term. Maybe in the longer term, but again, we have to know not just what is the metabolic change we're having, but what are we putting in our mouths? Maybe that tooth sensor does it. I don't know, but I think it's going to be time before that happens.
How do we as nutrition professionals help the older generations not feel like they're being left behind?
Not feel left behind? Am I an older generation?
No, that's why we're asking you.
Oh, that's why you're asking me, okay. Again, I said make it fun. I mean, I give the story, and some of you heard it when I was speaking earlier this week, was about I got Alexa. You familiar with Alexa? The Amazon thing that you speak in to say, Alexa, what's the temperature outside? Alexa, sing me a song. I got Alexa for my father and mother-in-law, who are 85 and 83. And they phoned me one day and said, it's not working. I said, what do you mean it's not working? I said, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I went to their house, and I said, okay, show me how you work it. And they go, Alicia, Alexandra. So I know that they both had watched Star Trek, so I changed the parameters on it from Alexa to computer. And now they go, computer. But I mean, make it fun, make it interactive.
Do you have any comments excuse me, it just jumped. Do you have any comments to how wearable tracking can help health professionals, since clients and patients cannot lie or cheat on tracking?
Well, again, the tracking is going to measure outcome. It's going to measure activity and things like that until we can get to actually some sort of metabolic, that idea of the sensor in your stomach. So, I mean, what you can do with patients is ask them to see their tracking. What is, if you've been tracking steps, let's see your steps for the last month. And notice that you walk, 10,000 steps once every 2 weeks. And, can we figure out that activity? So if they're tracking things like that and they can share it with you, I think that's a great way of just interacting with them and showing them, again, how it can be much easier.
Do we have time for one more?
I do.
Okay, perfect. Can you elaborate more on the work you have done with local food banks?
Oh, local food. So local food banks, so the work we've done in the last 7 years of Feeding America and the local food banks is around sourcing nutritious food. So about 5-6 years ago, we were asked, how do we get better fruits and vegetables and fresh product to the food bank network? Because it's mostly frozen and canned foods, which are still nutritious, but they want more fresh foods. So we actually set up a method of how to go directly to farms in California and Michigan, et cetera, and get, particularly when the farmers were selling off the primary to the retail stores, and there are things like the ugly fruits and stuff like that, we were able to get and capture those. The second one was working with retailers around protein. And the protein was, retailers at the end of the week. So if I've got, a shelf-ready sirloin steak sitting in the shelf, but then it's coming up to code date, what do I do with it? I ended up throwing it out. What we did was we said, you've got a best before date on the product. Have a donate before date as well. That's maybe 2 days earlier. And then take that product and freeze it, because you can freeze the meat. And then what happened is once a week, a truck would come by to the Walmarts, to the Krogers, to the Hy-Vees, whatever, and pick up the excess, not only the bread, which they've been picking up for years, but also the frozen meat. And we had to put a frozen compartment in and things like that. But it was able to get better proteins to the food banks as well.
We'll squeeze one more in. If most people are heavily influenced by family and friends when it comes to food choices, how would you recommend dietitians promote their credibility and leverage themselves in all the noise?
Part of it is it may be around working. So I gave the example of south side of Chicago working with the grandmothers in order to influence the children. That's one way. Looking at depending on the social family structure where you are, depending on either ethnicity or geographic level or whatever. If there is a family unit with a grandparent, being able to convince them helps convince the family. The other is where else are they getting information? And that's where social media comes in, and looking at how people are being influenced and where they're going for information. And how do you, not necessarily cut off where they're going, but how do you reinforce or make that information even better?
Thank you so much. And we've come up on our time, so I want to thank all of you for submitting so many wonderful questions. Dave, thank you so much for doing the rapid fire with me. And enjoy the rest of your FinCE. Don't forget, please do the evaluation. It'll take you about a minute. It's in the app. We would love to hear your feedback from the session. And there was one last question about your slides. Are you okay sharing the slides?
Yep, you can have them.
If you're not seeing them in the app, I will double check with the wizard behind the curtain and make sure that those get loaded for you. Thank you again for choosing our session. Have a good day, you guys.